What? 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 Are you gonna end it right there? Sucker fool. Sucker fool. Sucker fool. I just minimized everything. Is it still on stream? Okay, still on stream. Is there a second game? As far as I know, there is not a second game. All right, let's cut the volume down. Cut it in half for me. Let's give some thoughts on Monochrome Mobius Rights and Wrongs Forgotten. Uh, Overall thoughts? I had a really good time with this game. I was having a ton of fun with the combat system, and the characters were pretty much really enjoyable to interact with. Um, I liked a lot of the NPC interactions. Um, I liked I liked how they approached a lot of things with the story as well, until we got to the capital city for the first time. And then the game started to crash and burn for me. Like the gameplay still continued to be really great and awesome, and the characters continued to be pretty good. There was a little bit of fall off there at times, but the story of the game really let me down. And it's because as soon as we hit the capital, it turned into like side quest extravaganza without like any progression of plot or doing anything interesting or showing that our characters are actually progressing to a point where we can actually believe that they're a successor to Diko Toma. Um, it it was really disappointing to me uh, to kind of see it just take that approach, because before we reach the capital, when we're in Arva Shulan, and we just like had an encounter with Maya Cow, like this was the peak of the game for me, because the story was doing something really interesting. Hey, Digital Hearts. It was setting up a plot and showing like what the Mikado could be, or what the Mikado was kind of plotting, and they just didn't really do that at all for the rest of the game. And the rest of the game was a long freaking time. It was like 30 plus hours I spent like doing a bunch of side quests and side activities and silly things within the main story. And I just wasn't on board with that. So um I have here, the game was fun for the first 12 hours, where we have our first confrontation with Maya Cal and Arva Shulan. After we arrived in the capital, it devolved into something with no structure or reason behind it, just a random assortment of scenes and sequences, some more impactful than others. Yeah, like even the narrative development, just it wasn't there. It felt like more or less a completely different story that they were trying to tell. And it yeah, it just didn't it didn't go so well for me. For the story, was it satisfying? Hmm. That's an interesting one. I'm going to say no. All right, so I was mentioning for the story, was it satisfying? So I think I'm gonna lean no on this one, and this is probably because I, I'm taking this game as um like what I saw, what I experienced, and I I felt like the game set me up to have Arva Shulan be the main antagonist. And they were the antagonist, but like I wanted to spend more time there. I wanted to go back and forth between the worlds and figure out what's going on and uncover the mysteries of what they're doing and how it's happening, and actually uncover some sort of mastermind plot that we need to stop and fight Maya Cow once or twice, get to know the grizzly guy and the fortune teller guy and the Shantura, like I wanted Arva Shulan to be a more central role, and it felt like a very minor role in this game, and that was really disappointing to me. And so, like, the fact that we got so little of Arva Shulan, just it inherently doesn't make it satisfying to me. I'm also not really the biggest fan of the ending. I do like the Mikado's approach. I think it's interesting for him to take the stance that he did, and like it didn't go with the typical anime approach of like, oh, you know what, we'll forgive you, we'll all be friends, power friendship. Like he was just like, nah, you guys, I gave you the chance to make up for your mistakes, and you just chose to make more mistakes. He was even like keeping an eye on them with the ravens and things like that. So he definitely didn't forget about them. He could have conveyed that to them. I feel like he left some things out, but it's fine. I'm not sure it was really all that satisfying to me. Does it feel complete? Excluding the scene that we just got, which I guess if you're watching on YouTube, you probably haven't seen that scene yet, because I cut it out so that we could be here, so that the scene could be something else, whatever. But excluding that scene, I would say that it feels complete with an asterisk, and that asterisk is I feel like the training montage is missing in this game. We didn't train up to be as strong as Digotoma. The game just like time skipped without any sort of time shenanigans. It's just like, we're not ready, and then snap of the finger, oh, we're ready, and then we're doing all these crazy things with all these powers and things like that. Maya Cow was just, he what happened to that man? Also, I have to add, this doesn't really belong for Does It Feel Complete, but I'll probably forget it. So glad Maya Cow wasn't Ashdor's father, or, whatever else they could have done. I'm glad he was just some guy in Arva Shulan who is just really freaking strong. It made that character much better for me. But yeah, how was the pacing? I thought the pacing was good, if not a little quick in the beginning, then falls off a cliff after reaching Yamato Capital. And I've touched on this a solid amount already. The game just doesn't do anything interesting once you reach Yamato Capital, and it's really, really unfortunate. There are interesting things that occur, but overall it's just like I felt like we wasted so much time with silly things. Thoughts on the story? I like how the game introduces its characters and subsequently leads them from plot point to plot point. Feels natural for Ashtor to want to help Shunya, which in turn causes him to stumble upon a mystery involving the Mikado and his role with Arva Shulan. And, obviously this was somewhat short-lived, but I do like how they introduced this plot point, which they then did not continue, unfortunately. Our first visit to Arva Shulan was a neat experience to have been given, but it feels like it was either presented too early or ripped away from us too soon. Yeah. So we didn't really get to do a ton in Arva Shulan, and that's part of like where my mystique and wonder and desire to spend more time in that area is because we kind of just got there, we went into some ruins, and then like it was cut short. I wanted to go there multiple times. Even my comment of our first visit to Arva Shulan, I was anticipating multiple visits to the place, and it just never happened. And it's kind of, to me, it's strange to start off the game with so much emphasis on going to Arva Shulan, and then once you reach the capital, our goal is we need to go back to Arva Shulan, and it just never happens. It's such a strange thing to interact with, and I really wonder why they went that route. The training with Diko Toma is a huge pace killer and has drastically reduced my interest in the game. We've been relegated to required side quests, and that's never a good sign. The tasks themselves also make no sense. Diko Toma is an 8-pillar general, and one of his jobs is to clean out a sewer? I still remain confused by that. I played the game. Oh, I was like, where am I going with this? I played a game months ago with a time skip, and I stated I would rather see the stuff that happens during that time because it's really important. Perhaps this experience with Monochrome Mobius speaks to the benefits of time skipping rather than showing it. So, even though they didn't really justify the power of Ashtor and crew from the moment we start training to the moment where we're awesome, superpowered, awesome people. I played a game months ago that basically time skipped that training session of sorts. And I was really kind of disappointed by that because I wanted to see the growth of the characters. It was such an interesting aspect that they were just skipping over. And in this game, I feel like they should have cut all that out and just did like, here's our 3-minute recap of what happened in the last several months or years or what have you of what occurred in our training montage, because it didn't propel anything forward. It just kind of it wasted so much. The Tokara events are interesting and well presented, but they struggle to find a solid footing due to lack of story structure prior and preceding them. The ramifications of these events should have a large impact as a whole, but we still have time to goof around somehow. So Tokara, the merchant city where everybody turns into like zombies and stuff like that, I really do struggle to understand why those events occurred and why they were important. If I were to hazard a guess, maybe like that happens in the other games or something like that, and it's referenced and they're just like, we have to do this, but they didn't really justify it. It felt like another side quest because there was no like super significant thing to tie it to everything else that was going on. I guess it was our first introduction to the purple amber, which is such a tiny detail that really doesn't do anything, but I don't know. I wish the Tokara segments were more integrated with something more important. Maybe if they were working with Arva Shulan, which Homeboy Slice was like a raven or something like that, which we never brought up ever again, by the way. I would have liked to uncover more about that. Tie it in, if there is a raven that betrayed the stuff, like let's go into that. Let's tie it into the Mikado somehow. Our training under Dikotoma feels like it bore no fruit, while the party members somehow feel as though they are ready. This creates confusion on my end because I can clearly see both the game's presentations of character power level, as well as story events and training sessions, that these party members need so much more time. I've kind of talked this one to death, but what the game is conveying does not necessarily match up with what the game is conveying. For some reason, though, they are given latitude as if they are ready, and because of it, make situations worse. For Izumo, there is no justification to send Ashtor and crew there. If Mayakawa was behind the attacks, we couldn't scratch him, let alone stop him. So when Izumo was being attacked by Arva Shulan and Dikotoma is sent there, what is Ashtor and crew going to be able to do? They can't even scratch Dikotoma. So if Dikotoma finds his opponents worthy of being fought, then how does Ashtor and crew add anything other than get in the way and cause Dikotoma to have to worry about protecting them? In Tokara, an 8-pillar general should have been sent because Ashtor and crew have no business being there. Not only does their power not rival an 8-pillar general, they actually make the situation worse by empowering Ishinin. This one was crazy too. Like, what are you doing? What are you doing allowing them to go? If they sent Raiko, for example, Raiko would have handled that, got his business done, everybody's good to go. I don't know what the Mikado and everybody else was thinking. It's very concerning to see our party members lose touch of reality and common sense when it used to be present with them. It's even more frustrating for the characters to make the decisions to entertain the idea, let alone allow them to do it. Now, the characters in this game, they sometimes they're just like, yeah, I'm strong enough to do things that I'm not strong enough to do, and the other characters are like, you know what? Yeah, I saw you get that strong. And it's like, hold on a second, I didn't see that. And I know you didn't see it because I didn't see it. I don't know what they were doing. Let's catch up a little bit on chat. You also get the Mikado's main arc in the Mask games, and that's why this kind of left you hanging on that front. Ugh. Okay, I guess that makes some sense. Gentura telling something to Ashta and Nava when leaving. No one notices that Ashta and Nava don't leave. Yeah, right. I didn't catch that. I noticed that they didn't go to the portal, but I didn't make the connection that they didn't leave. You didn't feel like Munachika became Pillar General either? They just mentioned it, but didn't make her officially one? She wasn't in that ending scene either? She probably became one. Guess the sequel would be Ashta and Nava still remember a piece of themselves and sacrifice themselves to give Shunya back? Maybe. Training arc and the parts in the capital were much more enjoyable for you as a fan of the series. Okay. I figured there were callbacks. And I'm sure this game has a very Trails approach of like, we're gonna make references and fan service towards the other games and stuff like that. But for me, that stuff like doesn't even impact. Like, even if I knew about that stuff, it would still make these training arc sections just not good because we're just doing a bunch of silly stuff. If we spent all that time, if we devoted that 6 to however many hours it was to actually progressing plot relevant stuff, investigating stuff, becoming a raven, doing all kinds of crazy stuff, then we would have gone somewhere. But it felt like a bunch of fluff to me. The game is split between giving more extensive backstories for Ashtor, Munachika, and Mikazuchi, and telling its own story with Shunya and her world. However, Shulan isn't even mentioned in the main series. Oh my, it's not even... That's even more reason for this game to have done so much more with Arva Shulan. I'm so disappointed. No, that makes me so much more disappointed. The game seemed very intense. You played the first 20 minutes of one of them, and it was 20 minutes of cutscenes. I believe someone, it might have been Dippo Mugu, actually, who mentioned that the other games could have like 3 hours of just talking between missions and things like that. Definitely visual novels. Shunya is a new character they made for this game. Okay. Go Shunya. Let's see, for writing, there's a fair amount of scenes with an excessive amount of dialogue, and they typically happen with the sillier moments. So, as a whole, I like the writing and the approach that the characters go to talking about things. But there are definitely a lot of scenes where I'm like, this is just taking too long. We don't have to spend this long on the dancing scene between Ashta and whatever her name, her sister, and Shunya wanting to dance, and like we could have cut out 5 to 7 minutes of all that at least, and we would have still got the point across, and the characters would still be as likable and all that other great stuff. There's definitely a lot of dialogue that doesn't necessarily have to be there, and what is there doesn't necessarily add more to what's going on. It just kind of just feels like needless additions, but that's just a me thing. For character interactions are largely great. I like that Ashtor points out the other characters' silly or unreasonable qualities. He kind of stopped doing that after a while. Halu has many great moments and lines, and I like that he's a more sarcastic mascot character rather than the typical annoying one. I liked Halu a lot. I also liked that he was kind of, I wouldn't say important, but, like he had his role to play. A lot of mascot characters, they're just there to scream and yell at you and things like that, but Halu was, he was a real one. For gameplay mechanics and design, what gameplay elements stand out? I appreciate the minimap and area map. They are useful and unintrusive. Enjoy this a lot. It's actually very interesting too because the minimap is at the bottom of the screen instead of the top of the screen, and you don't typically see that. I love that I can save anywhere. I wish more games did this. Saving anywhere is just a wonderful thing. It's kind of weird that the game has save points and you can save anywhere, but I don't. If you want to add, I guess they heal you and stuff like that, so there is that. But I'm down with it. The open world style of the game feels like it lacks interest and intrigue. While there are collection points, treasure chest enemies, and even interactables in various areas, the various sections in the individual zone feel the same. There's very little variety in visual interest or eye candy. So yeah, like when you're running around exploring a particular area, to me it's noticeable that everything looks the same. Like I'm seeing the same trees, the grass is all the same height. I'm seeing the same rock formations and things like that. I'm not when I see open world type games where like you're given a vast expanse where you can run around and interact with stuff, I guess. I want to see things that are unique to that area. A unique rock formation. Maybe it has like a painting on it. Maybe there's a flower field that is, just a completely different color from any of the other flowers in that area. Like one of the forests for a side quest kind of had one of those. I feel like Ghost of Tsushima kind of had this in it, where you just go to places and you would just see unique things for that particular place. And I really wish that this game had something similar, because the exploration doesn't feel as meaningful without that kind of stuff for me. Enemy density also feels on the higher end. This was for the beginning of the game. I would probably say the end of the game that's not necessarily relevant, but it is very interesting that there's like just a ton of enemies. But you can avoid them, so it's not necessarily complaints, more of an observation. Overall, the incentive to explore is low, which is exacerbated by the lack of treasure chest contents. Many of them are consumable items, and very few contain items of interest, such as accessories, weapons, and armor. I would say that I would probably tone this down now that I've beaten it. I would still say that most treasure chests don't necessarily have anything of value in them, but there's been moments where I've been like glad to see that something came out of a treasure chest. So I would still say that the incentive to explore is low, but I probably wouldn't attribute it to the treasure chest contents as much as I have written down here. Bonus points are a really cool idea. I thought this was I don't know if I've ever seen a game approach leveling up in the same way that this one does, where you can just put points into whatever you want, and sometimes some of those areas give you new skills and things like that. Like it was kind of cool. I was happy with that approach. I like that I have the option to customize the stats for my characters how I feel would be useful. And I can prioritize which stats I want as well, which is cool. It's also nice that I get additional skills by investing in certain stats. However, what is available should be listed somewhere so that the player has an idea what is worth putting points into, as there doesn't appear to be an option to refund them. So this is probably the one downside to it, is because you can't refund them, you should be able to see somewhere, like a skill tree or something like that, of like, here's how many skills are in this one. You don't have to display the skills. They can be like question marks, but like show us a reason that says, hey, if you put more points into this, you'll get something out of it, because I might want to put my points somewhere else, but maybe I want to get all the skills for, the characters first. So it helps incentivize where points could be put. Accuracy and critical are stats in the game, but they don't have any representation. How much accuracy is good and what critical modifiers exist? Is it just higher chance getting a critical, or is the damage value increasing as well? Yeah, so there are skills and things like that in this game that reference criticals and accuracy, but I never really gotten an indication of what those stats actually mean and how they affect things and how important they are. Mikazuchi had a skill where he hits attacks 4 times, but his accuracy is reduced. And towards the end of the game there, he wasn't really missing any of those attacks. Meanwhile, Ashdor was missing a lot of attacks. So, I don't know. Halu's mechanics feel very out of place. I still agree with this. His presence in combat is distracting at a bare minimum. His functionality as an attack in combat seems strange, as he's a limited summon. Feels unnecessary and clashes with the world as it has been presented. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like you could go through this game, completely remove Halu's combat presence, and nothing would change. It's a weird addition to me. I feel like it doesn't fit. The implementation of his ABL, which I still don't know what it stands for, apple, bologna, lasagna, I guess, is also not very user-friendly, being required to cycle through various nodes to enter subnodes that need to be cycled through doesn't feel good to navigate. A typical skill tree would have been my preferred implementation. I also wish these nodes were introduced earlier in the game to set expectations. It effectively took me 14 hours to uncover what the random materials I've been collecting are used for, and that's too long. You know what? I forgot all about this. Yeah, it is kind of crazy to spend 14 hours collecting a bunch of items and you don't know what they're used for or why they're important, and then you get their first usage, after that period of time, and it's like, oh, that's what they're used for. I wasn't meant to sell them or anything. I wish they could have introduced the mechanics necessary for them so much sooner, so that we know how those materials are meant to be used. And I feel like there needs to be some sort of tie-in there to the weapon shop that you can upgrade as well, because you need to know not to spend every single material on the upgrading system, because you also need to save some for the weapon shop. And so I wish they introduced that differently. Investing in the equipment shop is cool. I do wish that the numbers were visible, however. For example, if I needed 100 points to reach rank 2, I want to see that 100 on the bar. Furthermore, when hovering over items, I want to see a ghostly contribution, as in I can see how many points the item would add to the bar numerically, but also see a faded outline representation of how much the bar would be filled if I used one of those items. Just a nice quality of life thing, so that I didn't have to click on the item and then go over one to see how much it would increase it. Not a huge thing, but would have been nice. Sorting options would also be helpful, such as equipped upgrades, highest values for boosting ranks, and highest values for attack, defense, magic, etc. More quality of life things. Having the ability to see what items can be picked up in what zones would be helpful as well. The glossary is nice. Being able to see what the characters are and the monsters and what they drop and where they are, that is all great. Absolutely phenomenal stuff. I think what they're missing is just where to get certain items or where certain items are located. That way, you don't have to spend several hours running around trying to find certain items in certain places. I don't think having a stamina bar for running adds anything of value. I feel like this is pretty self-explanatory, but I feel like the only reason for a stamina bar is if you want running to be impacted by something, and I don't think that's really necessary for this game. Being able to field attack low-level enemies to kill them instantly, while also getting experience money and items, is really, really nice. Arguably too strong, though. I don't necessarily know where I sit with this, because I've probably gained 20 plus levels just by field attacking enemies. And I've probably gained tons and tons of money that way as well. It's really strong. Maybe the better approach is like a percentage of the rewards is given to you. That way you're slightly more incentivized to go into the battle and kill the enemies. But then again, how many players out there are going to reach level 99? How many of them? Not a lot. I'm grateful for the Wapter and the fast travel options. Yeah, I was hoping there were going to be fast travel options, and after a while, I thought they weren't going to give them to me, and then they did, and I was like, okay, great. Field attacking is insanely OP in the late game. I would agree. I got Ashtor from level 91 to level 99 in probably 20 minutes. Mask of Deception, or they can have 2 to 3 hours straight slice of life stuff. Yeah, Mask of Deception even tested your patience a little bit in the middle with its pacing. And that rarely happens. Even Trails games never drag for you. Mikazuchi's new look reminds you of Ichigo from Bleach. You said it was a raccoon tail, and the very first thought that came to my mind was a raccoon tail for Mikazuchi as well. But I actually think it's a zigzagoon tail from Pokemon. You're so sad about this ending. As someone whose first game in the series this is, and loves the characters, it's such a letdown. I personally don't think the ending is that bad, but I think the disappointing aspects of the ending for me are just because of the certain choices that precede it. Spending so much time in the training arc, not returning ever to Arva Shulan and stuff like that. Those are the aspects that make the ending not really impactful for me. But like as a whole, I don't think the ending was awful or anything like that. It wasn't that enjoyable. The idea of bonus points is a carryover from the main series. Okay. Grand Blue does this very well, the level up system. I've seen quite a bit of Grand Blue now that I've decided I'm not going to purchase it and play it. And game seems kind of fun. It's especially funny in the prelude where you gave your main healer so much HP, she also doubled as a tank. That's how I felt about Munachika after a while. I started noticing that she had like 100 more hit points than everybody else, and I was like, okay, you're just your job now is to heal. You know what? Speaking of Munachika, I feel like she didn't have an identity in this game. She had a resurrection, which was really good, and a really good heal. But I feel like she was, I don't think she should have been the healer. She has a really cool summon ability. She can throw rocks at people. She can leech mana and things like that. But her skill set is all over the place. Meanwhile, you look at someone like Ashtor, who's like, okay, I am a single target attacker that can do some big damage, and then I can like spread my damage if necessary. But like my job is to attack things and push them back or what have you. Just do damage with good accuracy. Mikazuchi is like, I'm going to hit you, and I'm going to hit you very hard. But I also have this really cool mechanic of summoning lightning rods and things like that, so that I can double up on the shock debuff. And Shunya is, I have this cool rune system that allows me to cast upgraded abilities, and my focus is being a mage. I'm doing lots of damage to you, and then I can debuff and I can buff. And then I have this really nice single target heal. And then Munachika's like, yeah, I can leech MP back with physical attacks, and I can hit you with the rock, and I can summon this guy that attacks multiple times, and I can heal, and I can buff, and I can resurrect. And it's like, why do you do everything? Can't you just do something really good? Well, I mean, her healing is really good, but like, I feel like she wasn't meant to be the healer, and that's what she turned out to be, because her spells, while can be good, didn't feel good for like the entire game. Or like her offensive spells, her buffs are not even that good. Defense and spirit, and I think they're fan buffs as well, which is not that great. Yeah, I really wish Munachika had a better identity. See if we can speed this up a little bit. I got work in 13 minutes. Combat, the 3-ring mechanic is super cool and something I never experienced before. I like that in addition to staggers, there's the ascend option. It's cool that buffs and debuffs affect the ring differently, in that it's only a portion of each ring in a location based on where it was cast, or one ring in its entirety. Also super cool. While I understand and even appreciate how quickly turns come up on the ring, I do wish it moved slower. I think there's some satisfaction in seeing the next turn approach. As it is now, it happens so fast, its representation doesn't offer much. So the ring mechanics are super cool in this game, and I would love to see another game that approaches the turn order the way this does, because having a standard turn order around the big ring, but then having a shorter wait time at the more inner rings you go into, really cool idea. And the implementation here was very nice. I would just like if characters moved slower on the ring, I feel like it would just look nicer and feel nicer for the flow of combat. Now, it's a turn-based game, so you could kind of theoretically say that the ring is more so just a visual graphic of what's happening rather than like what actually the turn order is, because characters move faster and slower and things like that. So I get it. I get why it's basically instantaneous, but maybe they tried it. Maybe they tried it being slower and it just wasn't working out. What do I know? Let me see. I think there's also a lack of visual clarity on which ring a character is on. It seems as though the top of the portrait is linked to which ring they are on, but it would be easier to read if the center of the portrait denoted that instead. I had some problems figuring out where certain characters were on the rings. Maybe if they increase the space in between the rings, it would be a little bit easier to notice. I did come to find out that when you summon Halu in battle, the rings have much more clarity there, and you can actually see who's on what ring. So just having that clarity be for the normal combat would also be very helpful. Gems are a neat idea, but I feel their impact is effectively non-existent. They just don't seem to matter at all. They probably have done quite a few things for me, but what's going on in the ring is not a whole lot of paying attention up there, because of how units interact with it and stuff like that. Like, there's no desire or necessity to even pay attention to gems, and there's not even a scenario where you can be like, oh, I want to do this so that I can get this gem. It just, like, the gems spawn and you get them or you don't. So there's not a lot of interactivity there. For continuing on with the combat, being able to knock back enemies on the ring is cool. I wish we could see a representation of how far back an attack would knock them on the ring. Just another quality of life thing. It would be nice to know that this action is going to knock them back a certain amount, but again, the clarity on the ring is one of the detractors to this, because it's not that easy to show that. But I can think of a couple of ideas. But would it clutter up the ring a lot? Probably. The stagger meter being invisible is a mistake, in my opinion. That's valuable information that should exist on enemies and party members and doesn't serve much of a purpose, being invisible. I could probably see why they didn't want to show the stagger meter, but I think there's plenty of room on the screen, and it could have been shown somehow. And I think that would have been a valuable strategic element to interact with, because the way it works now, you randomly get a stagger or you don't. You randomly get staggered or you don't. And it would be cool to have that be something that you can interact with before that random event occurs. Let me finish this. Actually, no. I need to take a small intermission here and clock in for work. Or get the clock in ready for work. And then I'll continue with the rest of combat and everything else. So just give me like 2 minutes. Okay. Whatever. I'll wait for that. I need to cut that out. It's a Arc Rise Fantasia all over again. Okay. The target selection could be more clear as it is currently with the okay, I know what we're talking about here. So the target selection could be more clear. As it is currently with a peach-like glow, it can be very easy to miss in certain environments and lighting setups in the game. So when you, let's say I want to heal somebody. When I'm targeting someone, they have a peach-like glow. And there's been multiple scenarios where I don't know who I'm targeting because of various elements in the combat. It's just not immediately noticeable, and I feel like that's something that should be immediately noticeable. In other games, like they have like little indicators on top of their head, they have indicators on their feet, whatever. I wish that was something that was also in this game, and I'm even going to add on to this because I don't think I have this written down either. There were multiple instances where I just had a hard time understanding what character, whose turn it was, because I wasn't looking at the ring, because paying attention to the ring is not necessarily advantageous. You're not staring at the ring, you're looking at the combat, you're looking at the character damage, all that other stuff. And so there's just been instances where an action happens, and then I'm just like sitting there waiting for the next action to happen, but it's actually my turn, but I don't know because maybe the grass in the combat field is too high and it's covering up the ring around whose turn it is. There are various factors and things like that. So I do wish that it was easier to see whose turn it was, and maybe you just mow the lawn in those combat areas. Don't have the grass cover up the camera and whatnot, and maybe it'll be a little bit easier that way. For dungeons, I don't think I had any issues with the dungeon in this game. I thought the dungeons were pretty much the length that they needed to be, and it was good. For cardinal sins, no value indicator or tell to determine enemy HP. Enemies do slump over when they're close to dying, but I think I'm in the world now where this is not good enough. It's 5%, 10%, it's not very helpful. And main story missions are side quests. We ran into that as well. For miscellaneous sound and music, I've enjoyed quite a bit of the music in this game. I've tried looking for a soundtrack, and unfortunately, there is not a soundtrack for this game yet. There is like a sound pack that has, 15 or 30 songs on it or whatever, but this game has more than that. So, I also think it's also not available to purchase because it was a pre-order incentive or something like that. It's a little disappointed with that, but the music is good. The music is good enough for me to want to continue to search for the soundtrack. For the voice acting, it's the game's done in Japanese. I don't speak Japanese, but Japanese is a nice sounding language, and I certainly enjoyed hearing the characters speak in Japanese. I will say that the subtitles were pretty good. I think they're, as Manodride has pointed out on a few occasions, and whatnot, there are definitely times where characters are the translation is not necessarily one-to-one. There's some liberties taken. it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's something that's noticeable, and maybe it should not be noticeable when you're dealing with translation, but what do I know? For graphics, the style of the game is great. I like the various different outfits and looks that many individual characters and NPCs have. Generic NPCs definitely stand out though, especially compared to protagonists. This was a weird one. I really wonder why the NPCs are like these low polygon, single color characters that with like no faces and things like that. Obviously, save texture space, crazy stuff, but I feel like in modern times we don't have to do that anymore. So it was a very, very specific choice that feels awkward when you're thinking about it in modern times, but it doesn't change anything about the game. It just it's something that sticks out, I guess. Character faces can feel like they stray away from the art, and sometimes the art strays away from other art. This is more specifically directed at Ashtor, who in like a cutscene dialogue, when his face pops up, that has a certain look. In combat, his face has a different look. And then in like his character model, his face has a different look too. And it's like, are these all the same person? Environments don't look as nice as the characters. There's some clashing that exists with assets and their placement. There are moments where it feels like multiple assets don't have the same artist or the same art direction for the various artists. There are instances in this game where like a tree doesn't feel like it belongs in this particular setting because the texture work and the lighting just hit it differently than all the other things. It looks like it was created for something else or created by somebody else for something else. It's that kind of stuff sticks out a lot, and especially as the game goes on, it can kind of get jarring in some places. So throwing that out there as well. The animations in the game can also be inconsistent in quality and refinement. Fights and cutscenes can be very exciting and well-paced with great movement. However, animations outside of that aren't as clean. There's lots of clipping with the clothing. This is a very big thing that happens in this game. It is very minor, not very important, but it does happen often. And at least from my point of view, I've never animated a scene in a video game, but I would always be under the impression that when you're animating a character for a scene, you're going to want to avoid those types of clippings. And there's been multiple scenes where that kind of stuff happens. At the end of the game there, I had mentioned that Mikazuchi, he swings his sword around and it goes through his head. Even if it was a different sword, it would have still gone through his head. So like that kind of stuff, you would think you would avoid doing that for the cutscene like stuff. Whereas, maybe in combat, running around, you'll let it slide. But for cutscenes, seems awkward. Walking animations have a noticeable slide to them. Those. We're walking into Trails territory with that. There's a lack of in-between keyframes for some animations. For example, in combat, characters will snap from one pose to another rather than transition smoothly into them. Again, minor stuff. Some keyframes and movement feel off. In loops that I've noticed, it seems like there's one frame too many. In some animation scenes, there's slowdown or drag on the characters or objects, and it stands out. This is specifically, like, there's some times where characters are moving, and maybe it's like an FPS thing, where, like, their arm is moving at like 15 FPS, and you can just like see it tick to where it's supposed to go. It's very, very strange. And then like walking animations and things like that, you can see there's like a snap once their leg has been fully extended to some degree, and then they'll go back into their like normal walking animation. Just random stuff that I've been noticing. Combat animations are nice. With that said, some of them, like Shunya spells, can take more time to complete than is needed. Specifically that one Inferno spell, you're sitting there for like 15 seconds as she's twirling around her staff and things like that before like she finally hits something and does damage. And it's like, is this really necessary? Just summon the things and then shoot them. You ain't gotta do all that. Let's see. I wish various graphical and user interface elements had more visual cohesion. There's a lot of brushstroke elements throughout the game's interface, and I wish more elements were consistent with that, such as the current turn indicator in combat, main menu and its submenus. The signpost marker maps are a perfect example of having cohesion with the rest of the visual direction of the game. Pretty self-explanatory there. For other, is the game worth recommending? I would recommend this game. Story blunders and pacing aside, this game is a lot of fun. I don't do every single side quest in every game out there, and I didn't do it in this game, but it was because I was on a timeline here, okay? If I wasn't on a timeline, I would have done every single side quest and hoped I got an achievement for it. So, just throwing that out there, I was having fun playing the game. If the developer is watching, to my understanding, this is the first JRPG of this type for you, and I think it shows in areas such as visuals and aesthetics. I think I've touched on this enough, but I think I'll leave it at that. You know what I'm talking about. Some mechanics, features, and graphical / user interface elements don't feel as good to interact with. This is like talking about Halu's ABL or upgrading certain abilities like Halu or weapon ranks and things like that, having to cycle through a bunch of stuff and check if they're going somewhere. For the bonus points, having to input like 60 bonus points to see if you're going to get something at a certain level or not. Just a lot of small tweaks could be made to make things a little bit more friendly to be interacted with. The game strays outside the typical JRPG formula in some areas, and I appreciate the risk. I will always appreciate games going outside the box and doing some risky things, and I think this game does a lot of risky things, and not all of them hit the mark, but I enjoyed the attempt nonetheless, and I appreciate it. Very cool world and characters. This world is pretty cool, Mikado ruling over people and doing all kinds of crazy things, and there's a whole other world of people that are banished over there because they did forbidden things, and now they're coming back, and the world is super cool. Characters, pretty cool as well. I wish the Mikado stood up though and just said, like, snap my fingers, you're all dead. But, I guess can't always do that. Great ideas in various aspects of side quest structure, exploration, and combat functionality. And do I want a sequel? I do want a sequel. Please give me a sequel. I will play Monochrome Mobius, Forgotten Wrongs and Rights 2. But that is all of my thoughts. To reiterate them, I had a lot of fun with this game and enjoyed it a great deal up until a certain point, and that was the capital part. And then, the game kind of fell off for me quite a bit. But I still had a lot of fun with the gameplay, and I think the gameplay was something that really pushed this game to be something that I enjoyed rather than just something that I'm putting up with. And I liked the characters and things like that, even though a lot of the times they were doing silly things and interacting with stuff that doesn't really matter. Those characters were nice to witness doing various things. And when the story does story things, it's nice. So, like if we could just cut out all the stuff that doesn't matter, this would have been a top tier game for me. But alas, not meant to be. Catching up on chat. Hey Adrenaline, thank you very much for the raid. Let's see. They didn't explain Shunya's vision or the time rewind or whatever it was, for example. We don't know enough about her and this world, and the others are saying she's not even in the other games. Then that dumb horror revelation at the end. Well, this game came out the end of 2022, so we can get a sequel. Come on. Also felt like the promotions and stuff was rushed, and you don't know what the time scale of all that was happening. That is another thing. The timeline is very nebulous. For the end of the game to when Izumo was attacked, how long was that? Because it seems like it was a long time, especially considering that they were infecting the ley lines and all that other stuff. Seems like a long time, but if you were to take the game at its word, maybe it was like a week. Happy Chocobo recommending Unicorn Overlord. Well, looks like I'll be playing that game. You like the idea of the ring system, but you think it could use some work if they do a sequel. Found it a bit confusing at times. There's definitely a lot of confusing things about the ring system. I think if they increased the space, if they make the rings a little bit bigger and compensate with the speed and stuff like that so it's the same, and increase the space in between rings so that each ring is its own thing, its own ring, and doesn't necessarily interact or touch the other rings when characters are on them or gems or whatever, that would probably solve at least like 50% of the issues I've encountered with it. Check out the Utaware Rumono OSTs. I'll get a similar experience. Oh, okay. I'll check those out. By the way, the fourth mask was Ashtor's father's. Don't know whether they just left it in Arva-Shulan when they found it or what. I believe Maya Cow destroyed it. I think that happened at the very beginning of the game. Well, he wasn't. Maybe he wasn't wearing it. I don't know. I have no idea. NPCs didn't have faces at first, but the PC version patched them in later. Not sure about the console version. 3D modeling has never been this dev's strength, but a 2D artwork much better. Okay. I mean, I guess, I'm trying to think of any NPCs that have faces. None of them come to mind, so what do I know? Pleasure. I see you've gone on for longer today, so you thought you'd take your chances. Nice to hear I enjoyed this game. Yeah. Didn't have a good time. Well, this is where I'm gonna have to call it quits, though, because you know, I have to go to work. Brothers gotta work.